Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Newman. I am the coordinator of arts programming here at the Rady JCC. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the 2022 edition of Music and Mavens. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Babs Asper Center for Cultural Arts, the Asper Foundation, Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, Winnipeg Arts Council, the United Way, Manitoba Arts Council, the Lampe Family Fund, Winnipeg Free Press, Jewish Post and News, Classic 107, and our individual donors for your financial support and commitment to our 2022 Music and Mavens series. The Rady Jewish Community Center is located on Treaty Number 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Cree, Oji Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. Before we start with today's presentation, I'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we anticipate that there will be no technical issues during our presentation, but please remember this is live, and despite our best efforts, we may have some glitches, and we will work swiftly to correct any unforeseen issues. Secondly, we will be taping today's session, and it will be available for viewing on the Rady JCC Music and Mavens YouTube channel. I'd also like to let everyone know that the concert portion of Music and Mavens will be starting on February 22nd, and will be live and in person. For more information on this exciting series of daytime performances, please check out our website at radyjcc.com. Thank you very much. I will now turn things over to Carla Burbreyer, our Music and Mavens founding producer.
Thank you very much, Shira. It is so wonderful to see all these names on the screens and see some of your faces. I know some of you have been attending since the first Music and Mavens speaker event, and this is our final virtual speaker event as part of the Music and Mavens speaker series. So wonderful to have so many of you here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our two presenters, and I'm very excited to share with you this presentation. It's been something that I've wanted to learn more about, and we today have the opportunity to do so. So I'm very excited about that. Terry MacLeod is an independent Emmy-nominated journalist and recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. After 23 years with CBC Winnipeg and 33 years with CBC nationally, Terry left CBC for new pursuits on December 31st, 2016. He is currently the producer, host, and writer of the Prairie Design Lab podcast that he makes under the auspices of the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Manitoba. With CBC Winnipeg, Terry was a host on Information Radio. He was host producer of the Weekend Morning Show and has been a producer and guest host on CBC's hit radio show Morningside with Peter Zosky, where he produced Stuart McLean. He was a regular guest on CBC TV's Midday. Terry will be joined today by Darrell Sais, whose family lived in Roostertown prior to their home being destroyed. And I know that Darrell's father, Frank, we are so happy to have him be a part of today's presentation as well. Please join me in welcoming Terry MacLeod and Darrell Sais and Darrell's father in their presentation, Rediscovering Roostertown.
Carla, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. And let me introduce you to Darrell with his patriotic Winnipeg Jets t-shirt, and beside him in red is his father, Frank. Darrell is the acting operations supervisor and a senior staffer, by the way, with Winnipeg Transit, and he has deep family connections to Roostertown. And he's here to help us to rediscover the story. Now, before we hear from Darrell, I want to give you a little bit of background. Like a lot of Winnipeggers, I was late in discovering Roostertown. I first learned about it 8 years when I was on CBC Radio in Winnipeg. How many of you were aware of Roostertown and the Métis community of that name? Well, you know about the Pan Am Pool or Grant Park Shopping Center or Grant Park High School. That's where it was. That's where Roostertown was. And I first discovered Roostertown when I was hosting the Weekend Morning Show. I heard about this urban social geographer, Evelyn Peters of the University of Winnipeg. She'd done a lot of research about it, and she wrote this book, Roostertown, The History of the Urban Métis Community, 1901 to 1961. It is a great, fantastically detailed book. Now, so I got Evelyn to come on the radio and tell me about it. And that book has since become a great success. Now, the first mention in 1909 of the term Roostertown appeared in the Manitoba Free Press, and it said, "This settlement, which consists mainly of half-breeds," that's what the paper said, "lies on the south side of Fort Rouge and is frequently the scene of wild orgies, which have been the subject of reports to the police from time to time. A raffle is one of the most fruitful scenes of trouble and an effort to will them to break them up. Police found it so disorderly that a simple raffle could create trouble, requiring police intervention." Another report in the paper said that Roostertown was, quote, "a village of patched up shacks and a scene of appalling squalor." Well, let's find the truth about Roostertown. At its peak, by the way, in 1946, 250 people lived in the community's 59 houses. And Darrell Sais is here with us, as well as his father, Frank. His uncle, Philip, couldn't make it today, but Philip was a very generous person to help us when we were recording the podcast episode. Now, Darrell, you and I first met, I guess, about 2 years ago when I was preparing the episode of Roostertown for the podcast. And we talked on the site right beside the Pan Am Clinic where your family's home once stood. What's your family's history, Darrell, in Roostertown?
Well, from my understanding is my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather, built a home there. And I think my great-grandmother passed away. And that's when my grandfather took over and looked after after his father, and married my grandmother and then settled the family there. So they were there up to till their land was expropriated in 1960.
They moved to the Roostertown site in the early 1900s from, what was it, from St. Norbert?
St. Norbert, that's correct, yeah. The Saises went and settled in St. Norbert, and then they moved closer to the city eventually.
Most of the homes in Roostertown, though, had no basement, no electricity, no sewer or running water. Your family was pushed out of their home in the fall of 1960. But how did your family describe life in Roostertown? And maybe your dad, Frank, could help us with that to understand what the community was really like to live in.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful, you say, Frank, right?
Yeah. He's got nothing but cherished memories of the place because he shared it, like I say, with myself, my brother, and my sister. And I jokingly say that my two daughters know everything about Roostertown because he talks about it so much. It was, from my description he's given me, it was a very tight-knit community. They looked after each other. So a simple thing as my dad would, in the wintertime, bring around water to the people that needed it. I think he sold it for a dime, I think you said, right? Water. And
75 cents a barrel. 75
cents a barrel. And the people that didn't have the facility, because the water pump was actually where Grant and Cambridge is. So to get it to the other homes, it was sometimes difficult. And he actually had a horse, so he was able to bring around the water there. But I guess the easiest way for me to describe how amazing it was there is a quick story of my grandfather and my grandmother. It was in the summertime. They were sleeping, and back then they didn't have screens in their windows. They just had a window. It was open, I guess, to cool off at night. And all of a sudden, my grandmother could feel somebody grabbing her hair, and she didn't know who it was. She looked up, and here's a man in the window. And my grandfather got up right away, and he was going to go see what the heck's going on here. And the person just said, "No, I just need a glass of water." Correct?
Yeah, glass of water.
I need a glass of water, and this is the middle of the night.
And he said he hasn't eaten in a couple of days.
Yeah, you must have came off the railway, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so my grandfather said, "Wait!" He opened up the door, let him in, and they actually made him a sandwich, gave him something to drink, and they gave him stuff for on the way later on for his trip. So they didn't have much, my dad's family, but simple thing is helping someone out like that. That for me, you can't explain it any better than that. What an amazing community.
What kind of work did people who lived in Roostertown, what did they actually do?
From what my dad tells me, my dad's family, his two brothers were employed by Royal Dairies, which is just at the corner of Cambridge and Grant. And I think my Uncle Lauren was employed there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they had Pounds Landscaping employed quite a few people in that. So
and I went to Brahms, Arlington, landscaping.
Yeah.
Landscaping and, you know, and
laborers.
And that's what they were, and that's how they made their living.
And then my grandfather, he actually worked for the city.
Yeah.
He worked at the yard over at off of Pembina Highway. It's no longer there. It's where the Boyd Auto Body is. Yeah, he worked there. My dad worked for the city for 27 years, and I've been employed for the last 32 years with the city. So it stopped at my two daughters, though. Their education.
One thing that people had said.
Just like that.
One thing with the people that the newspaper and that said, everybody in Roostertown lived on social assistance, which was not new. We did work for a living. I want to stress that.
Thank you for clearing that up.
You know how I feel about that.
But do I have it right, Darrell, that your parents didn't call it Roostertown? They had another name for it.
Yes, Pecan Town. And my dad didn't explain this to me until after we met with a consulting firm when they wanted to do the library. And that's when it came out. My dad told me what it was called, Pecan Town. He told me his story was an individual was looking for this Pecan Town. And my dad said, Pecan Town, you're in it right now. So that's when I thought, Pecan Town. Then he explained they called it that because of the hazelnuts in the area. To this day, my dad gets upset because he doesn't know who named it Roostertown. He doesn't agree with it at all. For him, it's Pecan Town. But it's hard, like anything we refer to Roostertown, because that's what most of the newspapers wrote it as. So it's kind of hard to say Pecan Town when it actually, most people know it as Roostertown. But he prefers Pecan Town.
And it's spelled P-A-K-A-N, right?
Yeah.
Pecan Town. Okay. And pecans are a kind of hazelnut, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. He said there's plenty in the area.
Yeah, there was lots there. Plums, cherries, and Saskatoons.
So when you were talking to the people from HTFC, the planning and design company that worked a lot on the Bill and Helen Norrie Library, they were really interested in possibly trying to plant pecans there. Is that right?
Yeah, they mentioned something like that. Yeah, there was a couple other things we actually, to this day, it's still not there, but I would love to see a replica of the pump, because water was so important through the community. To be at the Portage and Grant and Cambridge corner there would be nice to see for sure.
Now, I went with a whole bunch of your family in the summer to the transit stop on the Southwest Transit Corridor, where there's a giant kettle that commemorates Roostertown.
Yeah.
What's the significance of this kettle?
So the significance of it is the Winnipeg Art Council contacted us, and we met with 3 artists with the Art Council to have they wanted to put something at Beaumont Station to commemorate Roostertown. So one of the ones was the kettle, and I like the kettle. My dad, he doesn't really understand the understanding of it, but the kettle represent at the time, at the peak, that's how much water they would need to survive the community in a day. So he made it that big. And also the stories that he ever heard about the community was if someone came by, they would put on the kettle for some tea right away.
Yeah.
And so that's why he came up with the kettle as part of the signifying, commemorating the community there. So
we visited the library together after they opened it last summer, Darrell, and it has a lot to say about Roostertown, Pecan Town. Tell us, for people who want to go to the library, what they can see that commemorates your family and for the other people who lived in Roostertown.
Yeah, well, it starts at the front mural, really proud of the fact, and I'll have pictures later on that shows my dad's wagon, my grandmother and my auntie outside, and some homes that were part of Roostertown. And then inside there's some plaques on the side of where the books are held, telling the story of Roostertown. So there's a picture of my grandmother again with her daughter, with my Auntie Mary, and then there's my dad's wedding pictures in there. The Lyermy family and Bedard families up on a mural showing their family tree line where my grandfather's sister is part of, I believe. And
so the facade on the building, which is made of this kind of corten steel, that actually depicts relatives of yours, right?
Yeah, yeah. My grandmother and my auntie Mary. I was very proud of that. They even offered that. I would just like to say that the city was amazing. Murray Peterson from the historical department, he's been amazing. He's been very vocal and very supportive of getting these panels done in the library. My Uncle Philip was a little disappointed. He wanted a traveling one, but I said, this looks amazing here. We'll talk about that later.
What's inside the library for visitors to see?
There's plaques describing racism, having the houses moved, explaining how tight-knit the community was. I was just there because my dad got knee replacement surgery, so I went in there to have a quick look, and it's amazing. The plaques are on the side, and the family tree, and even they have some grass, looks like grass inside, being part of the, I guess, the hazelnuts or whatever they're trying to put. So it was very, very nice in there. If anyone has opportunity, by all means, it's very nice in there with the information area. They're trying to set the story straight now from what it was before.
They also just provided a really deep family tree of the families who had lived in Roostertown. What are the names of some of those families, Darrell?
Well, the ones I can remember are Laramie's, Bedards, the Saises, the Arcans, that's my grandmother's maiden name. Many other Roosens was a big one for sure. Cardinals. And I have slides later on that actually shows some of the families that were there in Roostertown.
Well, listen, Darrell, why don't we look at some of those slides? Because you gave us a little peek before we went on air here, but they're fantastic. Can you show them to us?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot here. How's that? Can everybody see it totally? You can't see my little other stuff?
No, it's very good. So what's the orange arrow? What's it pointing towards?
It's pointing where Roostertown was. So you can see the school there, and just west of that was Roostertown. And in the corner where the grass and the wood is beginning in the left top, that's where my grandparents lived and my dad lived. And then, so the next shot, and then where it's all open here, just to the bottom of Grant Park, obviously that's Grant Park Mall. And you can see, so. And then here's a little further picture out of it. To give you an idea how it is. You can see Grant here going up there. And before that, my dad told me that was a railway at one time. And then finally, here's the bigger picture that actually shows where Pembina Highway is. And then here's Grant and going up all the way towards Grant and Cambridge again. The next slide is just showing you a satellite view of what it looked like. So you can see Hector Avenue here, Hector and Jaffrey. That's where my grandfather's land was. And you can see where the blue is actually what it is now, Grant Park High School, Grant Park Shopping Center, the park, and Pan Am Pool, and then just south of that, the Pan Am Clinic. And then this is in Evelyn's book that she has. We were giving this, showed the different families that were living there at the time. As you can see, it's a little cloudy, but I can actually see McDougall, Bedard. I can see my great-grandparents home there, Francois and Marie Sais, I think 27. Yeah, there he is, in their home in that. So you can see the different ones there. And then here's some of the homes that were here. So which one was where Auntie Mary lived?
Auntie Mary lived in there. Ruth and Lloyd lived in there.
My dad's sister and her brother-in-law lived in the one with the stack showing there.
Yeah.
That's where they lived.
And Mrs. Hogg lived in that one there.
Yeah.
And Jim Friesian lived in that one.
Oh, okay. And how about
Lepines lived in that one.
Okay, there's another family, Lepines.
Yeah, and that must be a newspaper man standing
Oh,
there.
newspaper man hiding.
Yeah.
And
that's Rooson's.
Oh, there we go, Rooson's house. I didn't know who that was.
Yeah.
And I believe that's a landscaping,
right?
right?
And then right, but that other big house there, the big shack there, is that my grandparents lived in there. My dad's.
Oh, really?
After they moved off to Lorette, and that little shack, they moved in there.
Okay.
And that's one thing
you can't recognize.
I don't recognize thing as Roostertown.
You need the old telephone poles. Look at that.
I just don't.
Okay,
me,
that's
I
fine.
always said that's not part of Roostertown.
And
there's the Stocks.
Yeah. What were the names, Evelyn?
Bernie Stock and I can't remember her name, Matilda or something.
Yeah.
Stock.
Yeah, that's right, Matilda.
Yeah.
And they weren't Métis though, right?
No.
But everybody was accepted in the community.
Yeah.
And then these are the Laramies. My dad didn't know them, but they're Laramie family. Yeah. I know that from a picture from before.
Yeah.
And then this was some of the articles they actually had here.
Bad ones.
Yeah, my dad doesn't like looking at these, I think it was just more so the city could show that there's a reason why we moved them. I always remember when Evelyn had her book released at the library, at the Millennium Library, and she said that the city, she understood this, the stuff that she read, that the city did this to make a better life for our families. And yeah, my dad said, because it was horrible. They made life worse for my dad's family. Instead of having a home that they had and they had their own land, they ended up having nothing, living in the North End, living from house to house because of this. So I was very upset about that when they said that, and I still am to this day. It really bothers me.
I forget to tell them that when my mother and my dad bought that house on Pritchard Avenue, that we got kicked out of there because that person that sold that house was $5,000 in debt in back taxes.
They weren't told. I know, yeah.
And get out. That was it.
So then they were renting after that.
Yeah.
So here's my dad's water wagon. Here's another old picture on the top here. And there's the front facade like Terry was talking about. And I had to take a picture of my dad there. Very proud of that. And then this is just very quickly is the 1958 tax roll for 1501 hectare that showed my grandfather owned it. And then suddenly in 1959, he no longer owned it. And you'll see documentation later on saying they tried to negotiate with my grandfather to expropriate land, but my dad doesn't recall that at all.
No.
They never did contact him. And here's a letter in regarding to the people for the council made up that they're going to offer them $75 to assist the squatters for alternate accommodation. It's funny to say alternate accommodation. These are people homes that they're taking them from. Just think of that. Someone coming to you, the city coming to you now and telling you have to leave. We own this now. And it's just horrible. And this is just more documentation they had about it. It was actually for school division 1, they wanted the land for. Again, they offered them $75 if they were gone by May 31st. If not, then they're only offered $50 at that time.
Yeah, my dad got it.
Yeah. So this is the documentation where they expropriated my grandfather's land. I just paid attention to some of the dates because they don't make sense to me. October 29th, 1958, they did this saying they wanted to expropriate my grandfather's land. It was lot 5. And then the next one they're talking about, they tried to contact him and he wasn't responding. And then here's the official bylaw where they did expropriate. And you can see here that it's expropriate for the public purpose of the city. And all of it was 1958, but if you look at the bottom here, I don't know if you can see it, it actually says December 1959. So it doesn't fit where everything says 1958 and suddenly everything was done in 1959 because it was in June of 1960, my grandmother and my dad went to pay the taxes. And that's when the city said, no, you don't own the land anymore. And they didn't know what they were talking about. And then they were told that the city had owned it now. And then it was given as it was part of the park there they wanted. And I'll go back to the pictures here. Here's another picture I'm proud of. Here's my grandmother and my Auntie Mary. And you can see the front facade again is my grandmother and my Auntie Mary and my dad, my Uncle Philip, my Auntie Phyllis, and my Auntie Char. They're very proud of seeing that. And you can see the home in the back here. My Uncle Philip is the one. They had a different home before and it didn't really depict what their homes were really like. So he asked them to change it to what it should look like, which was good. So it was good that he had that input. And then finally here, if anybody wants to, I can give my email later on, but I have this, all the families that were in Roostertown. Let's go over quickly. There's 5 of them because there was lots of them there. The Atson family, the McDougall family, the Bedards, the Lund family, the Parisians. Oh, I forgot to mention the Parisians because I'm related to the Parisians. The Logan family, the Hogs, my dad talked to me about. St. Germain family, and then there's the Smith Parisians again, Parisians, and then the Arcan family, that's my grandmother's family, and the Sais family. And then this is what I was talking about earlier with Terry. They have these billboards up here, different ones. I just picked a couple. I like this one because this is what my dad talked about. We call it Pecan Town, not Roostertown. And here's one of the billboards up they have here for the Laramie family and the Bedard family. This is Elise Sais here. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. And she's in there. The Laramies are up here, and is it Bedard's on the bottom right. And here's another one. Roostertown develops into a neighborhood. My dad's squatter wagon there. And then this is one that was very important. I read it and I really like it because they were proud of their homes. No matter what the city said, no matter what the newspaper said, this is a very tight community that called it their home. And then here's the Roostertown kettle they were talking about. It's at Beaumont Station. Here you can see myself and my uncle, my aunt and my dad again. If you ever want to go at Beaumont Station, there's actually this right up here for Roostertown kettle and exactly what it meant. And then finally, one of the last pictures, our family here doing the tour of the library and the panels and that. I had to take a picture of it, and they're all very proud of it. And then here's our picnic we had last year to commemorate for Roostertown. And we actually got an apology from the mayor, not from the city, but from the mayor for the racist attitude so the city had towards the community. And then I like this one. It's outside. It actually talks about Roostertown, explains everything. Roostertown history, the water cart, the community, and it talks about the train tracks and so on, and the houses and the kettle. If you ever have a chance, you can read that. It's very nice there. And that's the end of my pictures. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, really, beautifully put together, Darrell. Lots and lots of really interesting detail. I was at that picnic last summer, and I had a couple of sandwiches with bannock and bologna, and nice food there. I got to talk to the mayor for a while. The mayor identifies as Métis, but he never really spoke very publicly about that. So I recorded a conversation with him about what Roostertown and the commemoration means to him and how important it is to be able to say it aloud. He said to me, as we were talking on my recorder, he said, Terry, I'm sure that there are mayors who are rolling in their graves now, knowing that a person who identifies as Métis is the mayor of Winnipeg now. Yeah. I was pretty impressed by that. You know, Darrell, I was doing a bunch of research from Evelyn Peters' book. In the 1870 census of the Red River settlement, there were 11,963 people living in Red River. There were 1,563 Europeans, 1,553 Cree and Saulteaux, and the rest of the population, 9,848, were French and English Métis. It was a Métis community in the census when Manitoba joined Confederation.
Yep.
And there was that promise in the Manitoba Act in 1870 to set aside 5,564 square kilometers of land for 7,000 Métis children of Red River. And even though they went to court over that, the land has still not been allocated. So the impact, I mean, the Métis community was Red River then, by a huge proportion, right? Mm-hmm. And then it began to change as the settlers came in. Tell us a bit more, though, about working with this planning company, HTFC, to figure out how to best commemorate Roostertown and what needed to be done.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, they contacted myself and said they were going to meet at the Pan Am Pool and discuss how we can commemorate Roostertown. And at the time, we didn't know there was going to be a library there. But we met, and there was quite a bit of families there. My dad actually met some of his cousins he's never seen. And we met. There's lots of talk, lots of promises. And it was very interesting. We had quite a bit of families. And we met. And I think we met because what had happened, how my dad got involved in all this too, was, and I guess I got the information, was Laurie Barkwell. He was doing a presentation at the MMF annual general meeting in Brandon. And I was going there to do some square dancing and jigging with my dance group. And I saw all the newspaper articles up that just told how bad Roostertown was. So I had to go over there. I had to point out, hey, that's not true at all. This is all wrong. He says, well, how do you know that? I said, my dad grew up there. He did. I need to talk to your dad. I said, well, I'll see if you can come tomorrow, because we're going back tomorrow. We had to do something. And I said, I'll bring my dad and you can see it. So my dad showed up and he said the same thing right away. This is all garbage. It's not true at all. And so he talked with my dad, and then my dad, they talked. And then I guess Evelyn and Laurie got together and found out my dad had a lot of memories of the Roostertown. So he shared the stories with Evelyn. And then Evelyn wrote her book. Laurie and Evelyn were very instrumental in all this, I believe. They started everything. And with the Manitoba Métis Federation and the Louis Riel Institute, for sure, because that's who Laurie worked for. And then we got the call from HTFC. They wanted to meet. We met. We gave them some ideas what we would like to see. One of them was naming the library after Roostertown. Again, we talked about having a replica of the pump at Grant and Cambridge. And they all loved the ideas. And I think we met a year later. It took a while. And I have to say, a lot of the families dropped out. I guess they just wanted to see some action quickly, which, again, it takes a lot of time. Things don't happen overnight. But I kept convincing my dad and my Uncle Philip to keep coming to these meetings. So we went to Grant Park, had the meeting. It went very well. Laurie Barkwell, again, had all kinds of information. And then we had another meeting at Sam Southern, at Fort Rouge Leisure Center. And that's pretty well, it was just my dad's family showed up and it dropped off. And then we had one other meeting at the Charleswood Library. And I have to say, it was me, my dad, my Uncle Philip, and my daughter showed up for that meeting. And again, I apologize. I'm sorry that there's no one else here. You're only hearing one family story. I wish you could hear more. And they just appreciate that we were there trying to share and asking us our opinion on stuff, which was nice. And I believe that's when Murray Pearson got involved back at that time then. And he did the resident school panels for the libraries. And he wanted to do something similar, but he wanted to get the story straight. And he was very, very vocal, and he met with us all the time, giving us updates and that. And I really thought maybe this was never going to happen, but it did. And it was very nice to see, especially when we finally saw it. I was able to charter a bus, picked up all my family members on the bus with my dad, and went and showed them everything at the library. And I have to say, my one auntie wanted nothing to do this. She was still very hurt by this. She said they took my home away from me, and she was very upset about it. But she actually came out and saw it, and she was very pleased with it. So it was nice to see. I was really pleased by that. So, and that's where we're at. They got the panels up there now, and just anyone who wants to hear it, I'm willing to share my dad's story. I wish we could hear more stories from other families. Actually, at the picnic, it was nice to see my dad and other people from Roostertown, the other elderly folks. The elders were all sitting around talking about old times. So that was the point of having the picnic, was just to get my dad wanted to talk to some of the old residents of it. So,
Darrell and Sherry, I just wanted to mention there's some feedback coming from, I think it's Terry's area. I don't know why, but there are some questions that have started popping up, and I'm just wondering if we could interject a few questions now, and then you could continue. Would that be okay? Yeah. So I'm going to read some of the questions that have popped up. One is, was there also a community where Brock Cordon School is?
Where, what school?
Well, there's a school on Cordon and Brock, and this person wants to know if there was also a community in that neighborhood. If Roostertown, I don't think so.
No, Cordon and Brock, no, Roostertown didn't go that far.
And another question from that same individual is, did the people that live in Roostertown attend school in the Winnipeg community?
Yeah, we attended Rockwood School.
Rockwood School, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question that's come in is, I'm hoping to ask if the Winnipeg Humane Society on 45 Hearst Way currently sits on Roostertown land.
No, not by my dad's. He said that's on the other side of the tracks. It was on the north side of the tracks, was Roostertown, from my dad remembered. Right, Dad?
Yeah, not
he doesn't know where the Humane Society is, but no, it wasn't. There was bush there though. My dad would go over there and that, but it was, people didn't live there, from the understand.
No, okay. There was no houses around. And on the other side of the tracks, no, there was no houses there.
Got it. And we have another question here. Could somebody explain the development lawsuit over Roostertown land that was in the news a few years ago?
Well, I don't recall that at all. I don't know if Terry heard anything about it.
Is that to do with the Parker lands, as they called it?
That was the Parker lands, yeah.
Yeah, Parker land. That
was in Roostertown.
That was
the Parker lands are adjacent to where the Beaumont station is, and the big Roostertown kettle. I used to walk on the Parker lands a lot, and then there was a big lawsuit. And
that was the misunderstanding. A lot of people said that was part of Roostertown. Until I stepped in and said, no, Roostertown did not enter here.
He actually went over to the standoff there, standoff protest, and he actually sat around and told them about Roostertown. He was telling them no, there wasn't part of Roostertown. So they sat around the fire and they're listening to my dad and his stories. So
yeah, Terry said it was interesting.
Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, Darrell, could we talk a little bit about one of the darker aspects of being Métis at that time in the Red River and in the Winnipeg area? And I'm talking a bit about racism and the experience that some of the people from Roostertown might have experienced. Frank, did you have an experience of that?
Well, what I didn't like is we were Métis, but they would always say, well, you're not Métis. There's no such a thing as that you're either Indian or you're half-breed. I said, well, we were neither. We were Michif. Well, I didn't say Métis. I said Michif. That means Métis in French.
Where did your experiences of racism turn up, Frank? In what ways at school?
School was bad.
Yeah. What happened?
They used to call us half-breed or Indian, and they'd run around and go, and I used to get a lot of fights over that. I remember fighting a lot. But then after a while, I sort of grew up over that, and I said, what's the use, And then what I guess what made them more mad than me was when I laughed about it, and they couldn't figure it out, And that I should be mad, but they end up being mad because I just ignored them.
What did the teachers or the school officials do about this obvious?
Nothing. They said the same thing. Like my principal, I remember one principal said that there's no such a thing as Michif. You're either Indian or half-breed, and that's really insulting. That's what I call racist.
There are still some houses standing that were built by Métis people in that kind of general area around Grant Avenue, Scotland Avenue, and that area. Is that correct? I've been doing a fair bit of reading about this. that there are some
yeah,
homes?
probably, yeah. Yeah, well, Roostertown wasn't just, where they, like my dad said, well, when we understand what Roostertown is, and I asked him one time, yeah, what does it mean, Roostertown? How far, he said, well, it's from Putnam Highway to Cambridge, from McMillan to the tracks, the south tracks. He says, that's part of Roostertown. But then after that, it got smaller. Like, around west, north of Corden Avenue, north of Grant, it was a different area. And like I said, where Roostertown was where the Pecan pool was, and that was, it just shrunk. That was around where the Grant Park High School is, the shopping mall is, and the Pecan pool, and that was that's part of Roostertown that was in between the two tracks. The south track and the north
How did it
tracks.
affect your family emotionally when they were doing the demolition of the homes that your family had lived in?
Well, I tried to get involved in it, but my dad, like, I was only what 16, 17. Well, if I'd ask the question, they say, what do you know about it? You don't know nothing about it. You're just a kid. Sometimes you're a nosy kid. You want to know what's going on, and I was one of them. And sometimes I wouldn't get no answer. But like what I call him was my Uncle Ed, he actually was my cousin, and my dad and my Uncle Jim a day. Actually another one was my cousin, not my uncle, but they got together and they talked about things. And if you try to interfere with it, say, you've got a kick in the butt or interfering.
Like through the consulting with HTFC, I got to sit with my uncle quite a bit, picking them up, going there and that. And what I learned was my dad he moved out because the family eventually moved to the north end, and and they kept touch with other families from Roostertown, and it was still they still stuck together even though they weren't back at Roostertown. And it affected my Uncle Philip for sure. It really bothered him leaving his home. And then when I talked to my auntie, that's when I really knew how much it still bothered them. That's what 60 years later, and it still hurts her, and she's still angry. And the one thing I really picked up from my Uncle Philip, because he stayed home and lived with, because he was younger than my dad, that after my grandfather passed away, my grandmother never had a home. She actually never had a home ever again after being removed from Roostertown. She was from home to home, and then the family couldn't help her out that much. They were busy trying to look after their own families. And thinking back now, it was very sad that she never had a home after this. And I don't think the city realizes what they did to some of these families. They didn't take their land in their house; they took their home away from them, and they have to realize what they did.
Yeah.
And that's why I always wanted an apology from the city. My dad said he didn't care, but I think my dad still cared. My uncle wanted one too, and we never got an apology from the city. I have to say it was the mayor who made an apology on behalf of himself. It's unfortunate he couldn't speak for the city on that part. I really appreciate him sticking his neck out for that, and actually saying that. He said it publicly at the picnic, at the reunion. And
yeah.
It was very, how can I say, the word I'm looking for, I'm stuck on it, but you could tell he felt it, and he was being very sincere about the apology.
Yeah.
That's what I found. I don't know if Terry did, but that's what I found.
Yeah, I recorded that conversation with him, actually have him on tape, apologizing, because he felt that people had been so wronged by what had gone on.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then, you know what? And the thing that really bothered me too is no Sais owned a house until 2 generations later. It took a generation before we were able, like myself growing up, I didn't know, we lived in Manitoba housing. I didn't know people could buy houses. I was blown away. What? You could buy a house? Just so it affects you. It affects the family for sure. And I always remember the one story my dad tells about when my grandmother, when they moved to the north end, and my grandmother went to the church. And my dad says she went to the church, the priest says, "This isn't your church. You're at the wrong church." And he actually pointed to a different church. Hey,
Yeah,
Dad?
he was that church.
I couldn't believe that. What?
What did that mean?
That means that I guess they didn't want Indians in that church.
No, that's church on Salford Avenue, Polish church on Salford Avenue.
Yeah.
And they said, you're in the wrong church. You don't belong here. You belong at the Immaculate.
Yeah.
And
isn't that crazy?
We're not supposed to come here. And
wow.
And then my mother didn't know what to do. She didn't know where to go. And that was like a slap in her face.
Yeah, I thought God went to all the churches.
Right.
That's exactly what I told my dad. Same thing. Same thing. So, but I have to say, Terry, with HTFC and the city and that, I have to thank him because it's been an incredible journey for myself. I learned quite a lot more about Roostertown with even talking to my Uncle Philip and my dad. Like, I didn't know it was called Pecan Town until later on. So I do appreciate it. And I do appreciate people wanting to listen to us talk and learn about the history and that. It's unfortunate we're just one community that was treated this way. There's many others across Canada that were treated the same. But I'm still looking for that apology from the city. I don't think I'll ever see it maybe in my lifetime, but it would be nice if it was an official apology from the city where they had the press there and they apologized what they did to that community.
I do a lot of work at McNally Robinson, which is on Roostertown territory. And I interview a lot of authors on stage there. And before every interview, the people from McNally Robinson, John Taves, comes on and makes reference to that we are on the territory of the Métis Nation and the former site of Roostertown. Do those kind of land acknowledgements make any difference to you folks?
For me, yeah, well, it's part of history, right? At least they're acknowledging they're on a former community that was there where, like you said, most of the people never even heard of it before. So they're trying to spread the story for it and the proper story. It'd be nice if the press came out and said, you know what we did back then was wrong too. But I guess they don't want to either. It's unfortunate. Unfortunate. I don't want to sound bitter, angry at that. I'm not. It's just it would be nice.
I'm not anymore. I just that's part of history. That's it. What I don't like is when it occurred through the 1970s that it's been 10 years since Roostertown was no longer around. Anybody from Roostertown they're no longer around. They're either all in jail or they're all dead. I read that in the paper in 1970. I couldn't believe it. That was like, I don't know.
So Frank, how do you find the capacity to be so resilient about this? You've got a kind of optimism about you.
Well, at one time it bothered me a lot, but now, it's a thing of the past. It's part of history. I'd like to forget about it, but I like the way it keeps coming back and forth with like meetings like this or something like that. It's interesting to listen to other people. That's the way I feel.
He likes talking with other people from Roostertown for sure.
Yeah.
And he really enjoyed the picnic there.
Yeah.
And so it was very nice of the MMF and the City of Winnipeg to put that on for us. They were very instrumental in making sure that was a success.
Yeah.
And those fantastic Métis dancers that you had there, Darrell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were they?
Norman Chief.
The Norman Chief dancers?
Yeah, Norman Chief Memorial Dancers, yeah.
Wow. They were
My dad got us involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. My mommy, you got my two daughters involved in it, and then I had to learn how to jig too and dance because I had to help out.
I got my 3 granddaughters involved. Yeah. And then I asked them one time when we went there they were having a dance outside that NCI radio station, and I took them there, the 3 granddaughters, and I says, how would you like to learn something like that? A couple of them said, yeah, but his daughter said, no, not me. And now she's in it pretty good. Yeah,
we enjoy it for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Part of our history and our culture, right? You know what, the biggest thing, Terry, and I know a little off subject, but what really I'm amazed is how they can dance to old time waltzes, and these are waltzes back from the 1800s, right? The early 1800s, and I actually danced an old time waltz with my daughter on at her wedding this past October. I really enjoyed it.
Terry, there are some comments coming up that I think that maybe I could share a few of them so that Darrell can hear. Is that okay if I chime in right now? So somebody has written in, Darrell, I'm so glad to have this opportunity to sit around this virtual fire and hear your stories, even for a short time. Okay.
I just appreciate people want to listen to it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. A question that came in is, what was the population of Pecan Town at its peak? And approximately what year was that?
Oh, I read it in Evelyn's book. It was after the war, it got, there was a high population there. And I forget what it is. I apologize for not having that, but.
And the same person has written in that they lived in a high-rise apartment on Taylor Avenue that would have been in the original Pecan Town in about 1980. And as a former resident of what used to be your home, Darrell, I apologize for what was done to you in being evicted from your home and in being treated with racism and inadequate compensation. Wow. And that came from Beverly. So thank you for that, Beverly. Somebody else has written in that they enjoyed the picnic, but not the wasps.
It was very windy that day too.
Now, and there's a question here, which I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe the question is, what is the Métis relationship with the Indigenous people? I'm not sure. This came from an Earl Polanski, and I'm not sure if I understand the question there.
I think they're asking what's the difference, because I saw a little bit popped up. I could be wrong, but I think my interpretation of it was Métis compared to the Indian English, which is a half-breed, right? It's a different culture for sure. Like the Métis, for my dad, which I don't agree totally with, he says true Métis is French and Indigenous, which it's however you're raised. If you're raised as a Métis, which we were, it's a different culture saying as a half-breed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now this is from Kylie Sais. Is that your daughter?
My daughter.
Okay, yeah. And she says, that's the story I still tell when I teach dance. Thank you very much, Papa. So your daughter's in here somewhere. So yes, I just wanted to get those comments in before we ran out of time. Terry, you're welcome to take over again.
Frank, what language did you folks speak at home in Roostertown?
Well, my mom and dad, when they were together, they always spoke that, well, I always say the slang French, not the real French, like the French or Montreal French, but the slang French they spoke at home. And I could understand it, but my brothers and sisters, they would come with, what's he saying? What's he saying? You know, so I would say, go behave yourself, because I think he's looking for his strap.
Oh, I found someone asked about Roostertown at its peak, its population. In 1946, 250 people lived in Roostertown's 59 houses. And that statistic is in Evelyn Peters' book.
What year?
46.
1946.
Well, that was before my time. I was born in 42, but I don't remember. What did you say, 150 people?
No, 59 homes.
59 homes.
250
homes.
Yeah, 250 people.
Yeah.
Well, I think at that time, Roostertown stretched a long ways. Like I think, like I said, when it grew smaller, it was between the two tracks, Cambridge and Hector, to Wilton, is it? Nah, that's all. It shrunk. But I mean, when I asked my dad, where does that all go? He told me from Pebna Highway to Cambridge, from the tracks to the other tracks, McMillan, from to McMillan. That was part of Roostertown. And that was a big stretch. But but I don't think I ever went that far.
And then, like you were mentioning earlier, they didn't have any plumbing, any electricity, and that. And my dad always tells stories about how he was in charge of the fire in the wintertime, or that was his job in that. So I was thinking today, I don't know where they got the wood to burn all this time, but I guess you burn coal too, right?
Yeah, we burned some coal, but I mean, before that, we used to go in the bush and cut some trees and dead trees and bring it home and pile it up in a wood pile. And then after that, they got coal.
And then
delivered.
The other interesting story my dad was for me was he had my grandfather had a horse and buggy. I said, what, in the 50s? When I think of the 50s, I'm thinking of cars, and here's my dad's family, a horse and buggy getting around in that.
I remember going downtown on a
horse
and buggy. Oh, yes, back in that late 50s.
I had to say, are you sure?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be cars. So
like my dad borrowed the horse to one of his friends. They were picking up scraps, and I went along with downtown to the scrap yard that I had. We picked some scraps, and we took it to the scraps, sold it to the scrap dealer, and then I remember going down that Maryland Street Bridge with the horse and the wagon. You mean that was fun? Well, I was only a kid then, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I was studying a lot of maps of Roostertown as I was preparing for the conversation. And there was a time when early parts of the community were around Grant and Osborne, like that far east, that they were almost at Osborne. And then the community moved slightly almost every year further west along Grant. And so and then eventually your family was on Hector Street eventually, right?
Yeah.
1501. Yeah. The other thing I like to add, and we never mentioned it, was expand a little more on the squatters. They weren't squatters there. My dad explained that there was some individuals who maybe owned maybe 2 or 3 homes that rented it out. So my dad showed his aunt and uncle where my aunt and uncle lived. That was actually a house they were renting. And so, when they say squatters, they weren't squatters.
No.
And their houses weren't built from part of the railway, from the boxcars and that. By no means. They were built.
Was a joke.
Yes. And that hurt a lot too when they would say stuff like that. I know it really bothered my father for sure.
They would steal lumber from the train tracks. I mean, from the railroad, boxcars with their boxcars apart so they could build their shacks. What the heck? Where did they get that from?
Yeah. And then I'll expand a little more on the Roostertown, where the name came from. The stories my dad heard, which are totally untrue, is it was named because someone owned a lot of chickens there. And my dad says,
that was another joke.
Yeah. And then they had rooster fighting was one of the things too. That's why they called it Roostertown. And my dad says, no, there was none at all. And the other thing about having parties there all the time, my dad says, no, they'd have the weekend party one time, every once in a while, but not every night in that. And my father said the police rarely came around there.
Right.
And
they said in the paper, it said the police was there all around checking.
No.
Hardly see the police.
My dad shares the same story as Yvonne Dumont, where they talk about where once they'd have dinner now it was move all the furniture out from the living room into the kitchen so they could have themselves a party, which would be jigging and square dancing and playing fiddle, where my grandfather would play fiddle. My dad said he'd jig a little bit once in a while. So he jigs different than I do.
Yeah. I'm not good at
people are interested in finding out more about Roostertown. Is Evelyn Peters her book? Would that be one that you would recommend that people read?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, she explained everything in there and how badly they were treated, how they were removed, and that. Like to this day, I've never asked my dad. So when you moved, did you move? Was the house still standing, or did they tear it down right away as soon as you left? I've never asked them that. I just haven't had the nerve to ask them. So I guess maybe after this I'll ask them. So what happened? Did you move?
What?
When you moved from your house in Roostertown, did they demolish it immediately? When did you see? Because he worked at Royal Dairies at the time.
Yeah.
So he had to take the bus all the way from the north end all the way to
Well, we more or less destroyed our own place. Like, and then they come along with after that, and then with this big pile of lumber there, and somebody set it on flat one night. Somebody set it on fire.
Oh, you never told me that, really?
Oh yeah, that would be. Yeah.
And if you want to know exactly where the house was, if you go to the Pan Am Clinic, on the north side of the Pan Am Clinic, there's a little shed. Like, I think it's a green metal shed.
Yeah.
And Darrell, you told me summer before last that that's exactly where your family's house stood, was right there, beside what's now the Pan Am Clinic.
Actor Avenue and that little street.
Yeah.
That was.
My Uncle Philip and my dad showed me where it was, because I asked where exactly was it, and that's when they pointed to the shack at the utility shed at the back of the Pan Am pool there. So that's where our house was.
So Darrell and Terry and Frank and all of our patrons, we're coming to the top of the hour now. And this hour has fled so fast. I also wanted to mention that somebody has commented that there are 18 copies of the book that Terry just showcased to everybody in the Winnipeg Public Library. Wow. If people want to just take them out of the library. So thank you for that comment, Beverly. And Faye has said, I have just had a lovely hour. So thank you for your comment, Faye. So I just wanted to say on behalf of everybody here, to Terry and to Darrell and to Frank, thank you so much for spending this time with us, for educating our community, for making us aware of what your family went through, Darrell and Frank, and what the other families at Roostertown had to suffer through. And I do hope that giving these kind of presentations is some sort of a little bit of a balm on the wounds that were inflicted all the way back then.
Yeah, I really appreciate taking the time to listen to our story.
Yeah.
You can't say thank you more many times.
Thank you, Darrell. And I also wanted to mention, as this is the final talk on the Music and Mavens virtual speaker series, I wanted to thank Shira, who is in the background there running this on behalf of the Rady Center. Thank you, Shira, shout out to you. And I want to thank everybody for having showed up today, and remind you that we do have the concert component of Music and Mavens starting up a week today, next Tuesday, live at the Rady JCC, and tickets are available at www.radyjcc.com. So I hope that I'll see some of you in person live in the Bernie Theatre starting next week. Once again, thank you so much, Frank, Darrell, and Terry, for having done this wonderful presentation for everybody. And I'm going to have us all sign off now, and thank you.